My daughter climbed the Gala Stage. She was 5 years old. Her name is Juniper, and everyone who loves her calls her June. And she was wearing the small navy dress with the white collar that I had sewn for her myself 2 winters before. And she had slipped away from the coat check room, where my friend Dilly was supposed to be watching her. And she had walked the whole length of a ballroom of 300 of the most powerful alphas in Paris, under the chandeliers of the Hotel Soleil on the Centenary night of Maison Voss, and she had climbed the 4 carpeted steps to the stage, while the woman at the lectern was 3 sentences into the speech that was supposed to announce her engagement. The woman at the lectern was Séverine Voss. She was 36.
Welcome, everyone! Don't forget to subscribe to the channel.
She was the Alpha Chief Executive and Creative Director of Maison Voss, the couture house her grandmother had founded in a single room on the Rue du Faubourg Saint-Honoré 100 years before. And I had been her wardrobe stylist for 8 months, and she did not know. She did not know until my daughter crossed the stage and put both arms around my knees, where I stood frozen at the side curtain and said, in the clear, caring voice of a child who has finally found the one face she was looking for in a sea of strangers, "Mama, that June was hers." 300 people heard it. The cameras heard it. Séverine Voss stopped speaking. She set down the page in her hand. She came around the lectern, and she crossed the stage, and she knelt down in front of my daughter in a 4,000 euro suit at the level of June's eyes, the way no one had ever told her to, and the way every alpha's body knows to do in front of a pup. And she breathed in once. I watched her breathe in once, and her face did the thing I had spent 6 years praying I would never have to watch it do. And June said it again. If you want to hear uncensored, too hot for YouTube stories, check out my Patreon in the description. Tell us where you are watching from and subscribe. I want to back up first. I have to back up 6 years because the night on the stage is not where this started. It is only where it stopped being a secret. The secret started in a sample room on the 3rd floor of a building in the 2nd arrondissement. On a Friday in June, when I was 20 years old and I did not yet know that the most disciplined thing I would ever do was already finished before it began. My name is Wren Calloway. I am an Omega. My scent is white tea and warm honey, with a thin cold thread of green stem running under it, the kind of scent that does not announce itself across a room, but that a person leaning close to my neck never forgets. I was born in a small terraced house in Bristol, on the English side of the water, to an Omega mother who restored choir vestments for the cathedral, and a father who left before I could spell his name. My mother taught me to sew before she taught me to read. She taught me the way the women in my family had taught for 3 generations, that the needle is patient, that the thread does the work and the hand only guides it, that a seam done right is invisible and that the invisibility is the whole point. I was 18. I was very good at being invisible. I met Séverine Voss when I was 20, and I did not know it was her. It was the last Friday of a June, and the École had sent 4 of us across the city to a private sample sale that Maison Voss held once a year for the students of the costume schools, the toils, the canceled pieces, the embroidered panels from collections that never shipped, sold for almost nothing so that the next generation could take them apart and learn how the seams were made. I went for the embroidery. There was a single bodice panel, handworked in white on white, that I had been told about by a tutor, and I climbed 3 floors of a narrow building in the 2nd arrondissement to a sample room with the windows open onto the courtyard, and I found the panel in a box, and I was holding it up to the light to read the stitches when a woman came into the room behind me. She was 30. I did not know she was 30. I learned it later. She was tall and dark-haired, pinned up off her neck in the heat, in a charcoal shirt with the sleeves turned back, and her sentences to the room a half-second before she did. Black fig, warm leather, the cold high note of smoke that has gone out. And it was, even then, even before I knew anything, the most adult scent I had ever stood inside of. She thought I was staff. I thought she was a buyer. We were both wrong, and the wrongness lasted exactly long enough. She asked me what I saw in the panel. I told her. I told her the truth, that whoever had worked it had done the hardest row last, against every rule, because they had wanted the most fragile part of the design to be the part that nobody could undo. She went very still. She looked at me, not down at me, even though she had a head of height on me. It was the hottest weekend of that June. I was 20 and a long way from anyone who knew my name, and my body chose that weekend, with no warning, to do the thing it had been late to do. I came into my first heat in a borrowed room above a courtyard in the second arrondissement, with a stranger's fig and leather scent already in my blood, and she did not leave, and I did not ask her to. We did not trade surnames. She told me her firstest name was Séverine, and I told her mine was Wren, and we both, I think, believed we were no one to each other. Two people the city had pushed together for 72 hours and would push apart again on Monday. On the Monday, she had to fly to Tokyo. She wrote one line on the back of a sample tag and folded it into my hand. "When you are not invisible anymore, find me." And I kept it, and I never used it, because 11 weeks later I learned that I was carrying her child, and I understood, with the cold, clean certainty my mother had left me instead of money, exactly what I was, and exactly what she was. Because I had found out by then who she was. I had seen her face in a trade paper on a newsstand on the Rue de Rivoli. Séverine Voss, named creative director, to inherit the house from her grandmother. And I had stood on the pavement with the paper in my hands and the small green note of my own changed scent rising off my skin, and I had understood that the woman who had held my hand through my first heat in a borrowed room was the heir to one of the 4 great coutures houses of France, that she had been engaged since childhood in the dynastic way those houses arrange their alphas, that I was a costume student from Bristol on a dead woman's scholarship, and that the kindest and the only thing I could do with the child I was carrying was to take her somewhere Séverine Voss would never have to choose whether to ruin her own life for us. I did not write to her. I did not use the sample tag. I finished my term. I told Nicole I had a family emergency. I went home to Bristol, to my aunt's house, and I had my daughter in a hospital in the Avon in the following March, and I named her Juniper for the tree that grew against my mother's grave, and I raised her on the wages of a woman who altered wedding dresses in a shop on a high street. And I did not let myself say Severine's name out loud. Not once, for 5 years. I want to be honest about who I was in those 5 years, because the honest version is the only one that makes the rest of it true. I was not noble. I have heard the story told back to me as if I were noble, the Omega who gave up everything to protect the great Alpha from a scandal, and it is not true, or it is only the smallest part true. The larger part is that I was afraid. I was afraid of being the small embarrassing thing in a powerful woman's history. I was afraid of a lawyer's letter. I was afraid of standing in a marble lobby and being told, kindly, by someone whose job it was to be kind on the house's behalf, that arrangements would be made and that I would sign here and here. I had been raised to be invisible somewhere beautiful, and I had taken the most beautiful and most invisible thing I would ever make, my daughter. And I had hidden her, and I had told myself it was for Séverine, when at least half of it was for me, because I could not survive being told I did not matter by the one person whose body had once acted for 72 hours, as if I did. She mattered. That is the part I could not say for 5 years. She had mattered for 72 hours, and she had mattered every day since in the shape of a child who tilted her head exactly the way Séverine had tilted hers in the sample room, and I had carried that mattering across the water and up a high street and into a one-room flat in Bristol, alone, on purpose, and I had called it protection. I came to Paris because of money, which is the way most people come to most places. June was 5. The shop on the high street closed when the owner retired, and the only work I could find in my actual trade, the embroidery, the conservation, the invisible seams, was in the cities where the old houses keep their archives, and the best paying of those, advertised through a conservator's list I had subscribed to for years and never answered, was a contract post in the textile archive of Maison Voss, restoring the historic gowns, backroom, no client contact. A 6-month renewable contract with a wage that was nearly double anything in Bristol, in a city where my mother had once told me to go and be beautiful and invisible. I almost did not apply. I sat with the listing open for 4 days. I told myself every version of the danger. And then I did the arithmetic that single mothers do at 2 in the morning, which is the arithmetic of June's shoes and June's school and June's teeth and the long quiet illness that might come for me early the way it came for my mother. And I applied under my own name, Wren Calloway, which Séverine had never known, because we had traded first names in a borrowed room and nothing else, for a backroom archive post that a creative director of a 100-year-old house would never, in the ordinary run of things, have any reason to walk into. I told myself the archive was a basement, and the basement was safe. I was right about the basement. I was wrong about the safety, because I had not accounted for Margot's. Margot Hess is the directrice of the Voss atelier, and she has been at the house for 41 years, and she is 63 years old. And she has a way of looking at a person that makes you feel the seams of your own life being read from the back. She hired me. She said, "Good, we do not hire hands here." For 8 weeks, I was exactly what I'd come to be, invisible, in a basement, restoring the dead work of dead women, leaving at 5 to collect June from the school the contract's relocation grant had paid the first term of. I thought I had done it. I thought I had threaded the city and come out the back of it clean. Then the Aubrac gown came down to the archive, and Margot's made the only decision in this entire story that I could not have prevented and did not see coming. The Centenary was in 8 months. The whole house had been bent toward it for a year. 100 years of Maison Voss, a retrospective, a gala at the Hotel Salé, and, threaded through all of it, the thing that everyone in the building knew and no one said in front of me because no one yet knew I had any reason to care. The Centenary was also to be the public sealing of the merger between Maison Voss and Maison Aubrac. The two houses joined the way the houses are always joined, by a bond between their alphas. Séverine Voss would announce her engagement to Coraline Aubrac on the Centenary night. It had been arranged the way Séverine's grandmother arranged things years before, over the long game of the two families. Coraline Aubrac was 34, an alpha, the heir of the rival house, elegant and cold and entirely suitable. The dress Coraline would wear to be presented in was a restoration, an Aubrac heirloom from 1949, the gown the bride's great-grandmother had worn, and it had come to the Voss archive because the Voss archive had the only conservator in the building who could save its disintegrating silver embroidery, and that conservator was me. I did not know whose gown it was for 3 days. I worked it the way I work everything, from the back, reading the 1949 hand, and I fell in love with the silver row the long-dead embroiderer had worked last and hardest. And then Margot came down on the third afternoon and told me, plainly, the way she told everything, that the gown was for Mademoiselle Aubrac, who would wear it on the Centenary night to be presented as the future bondmate of Madame Voss, and that Madame Voss herself wished to see the restoration in progress. Because Madame Voss, she said, with the smallest pause that I did not understand until much later, notices everything, and would want to approve the work on a piece of this importance with her own eyes. I had 8 months of warnings, and I used every one of them to be calm. I told myself she would not know me. It was true, she would not. We had traded first names. 6 years had passed. I had been 20 and invisible in a borrowed room. I was 26 now, and a name on a contract, in an apron, in a basement, my hair under a scarf, my mother's thimble on my finger. She would walk in, she would look at the gown, she would not look at me. Because creative directors do not look at conservators. And she would leave, and I would have survived the one thing I had moved to a different country to avoid. She came down to the archive on a Tuesday at 6 in the evening, after the atelier had emptied, alone, with a measuring tape still around her neck from a fitting upstairs, and her fig and leather scent came into the basement a half-second before she did, exactly as it had come into a sample storeroom 6 years before, and my whole body remembered the borrowed room before my mind had finished telling it not to. She looked at the gown first. That saved me. For a few minutes, she went straight to the Aubrac silk on the padded form, and she stood in front of the silver embroidery with her hands behind her back, and she looked at it for a long time without speaking. And I stood at the side of the table with my heart going and my face doing the contained thing my mother taught me, and I had time to learn her face again. It was older. It was the same. The jaw was the same clean line. The eyes were the same steady gray-green. She had a way of standing perfectly still that I had forgotten, and that my body had not. And around her left wrist, she wore a plain steel watch. And as she studied the embroidery, she pressed the pad of her thumb against the glass face of the watch. Once, slowly, a gesture I would learn to read like weather over the next 8 months. The thing she did instead of letting any other part of her move. I said, in 1949, I don't have a name. She said, not 1949. This week. She turned around then. She looked at me for the first time. And I watched her face do a small thing. A flicker, the way a person's face changes when a smell reaches a part of the brain that is older than recognition. She had caught my scent, the white tea and the green stem across 2 meters of basement air, and some animal floor of her had felt the borrowed room without knowing why, and she did not place it. She did not place it. I want to be clear, because everything that followed turned on this. She did not know me. She only knew that something in the room had touched the underside of a memory, and she was a woman who noticed everything, and did not yet understand that the one thing she had failed for 6 years to notice was standing in front of her in an apron. She said, against the conservation rule. I said, the strong areas don't need me. She was quiet for a moment. The basement was very quiet. Then she said something I did not expect, in the surgical, even voice I would come to know. The voice that never rises, that says the largest things in the smallest number of words. That's how I was taught, too, by my grandmother. And then she said, looking at the gown and not at me, the line I would hear her say a dozen times over the next 8 months and understand fully only on the stage. I notice everything. I should have left it there. I should have let her approve the work and go upstairs and to be the woman I would dress for her own engagement. But she asked me a question about the 1949 thread that no one had asked me in 6 years. A real question, the kind my mother used to ask. And I answered it honestly, the way you answer honestly when some old part of you has decided before your mouth has. And she's in the basement for 40 minutes past the time a creative director stays anywhere. And when she finally went up the stairs, she stopped on the 3rd step and looked back down at me and said, "Calloway, you'll do my fittings now." And she went up, and I stood in the empty archive with the aubrac silver shining on the form, and I understood that I had failed, in the space of 40 minutes, at the one thing I had crossed an ocean to do. The first fitting was 4 days later, in the private fitting room on the 4th floor that only she used, with the triple mirror, and the north light, and the single chair. I want to tell you what those 8 months were, because the 8 months are the part that matters, more than the sample room and more than the stage. The 8 months in which I was Séverine Voss's stylist, in a building, 3 days a week, close enough every day to touch the woman whose child I had hidden and did not touch her and did not tell her, and held the perimeter I had built 6 years before, until the perimeter came down by itself on a stage. She was not what the trade papers said. The trade paper said she was cold. She was not cold. She was contained, which is a different thing, and I knew the difference because my mother had taught me to be the same thing, and the world calls it cold in women who do it well. She came to her fittings exactly on time. She stood in the north light in the half-made clothes, and she let me put pins in them, and she watched my hands in the mirror, and she talked to me. Not the way a principal talks to a stylist about hems and dates, but the way a person talks who has very few people in her life she does not have to perform for. She told me about the house. She told me about her grandmother, Geneviève, who had built Maison Voss out of one room and a borrowed sewing machine in 1924, and who, at 74, still came in on Tuesdays and corrected the apprentices, and was the only person on earth Séverine was visibly afraid of. She told me once, with the measuring tape moving in her hands, that she had not chosen the work, that the work had been chosen for her at her birth, the way the aubrac bond had been chosen for her in her 20s, and that she had made her peace with both by deciding to be very, very good at things she had not chosen. Because excellence, she said, was the only freedom available to a person who had not been allowed to choose. I put a pin in the shoulder of a coat, and I did not say what I was thinking, which was, I chose. I held the perimeter. I am proud of very little from those 8 months, but I am proud of the perimeter. I never let June and the Maison touch. I had 2 lives and a wall between them, and I patrolled the wall like my own life depended on it, because it did, because June's did. June was at a small school in the 11th. June was collected at 5 by me, or on my late nights, by Dilly O'Deal, the 24-year-old who lived on my landing and was doing a fashion school internship and who adored June and who knew only that June's father was not in the picture, which is the kind of sentence Paris lets you keep without questions. June did not know what I did. Beyond that, I fixed old dresses in a beautiful building. June had never been inside the building. I had made sure of it. The wall held for 8 months. And in those 8 months, the thing I had been most afraid of and had not named even to myself began to happen. Slowly, in the north light, with pins in my mouth, I fell the rest of the way. Not the 72-hour way of the borrowed room. The slow way, the daily way. The way you fall for a person when you watch their hands and hear how they think, and see the small kindnesses they do when they believe no one is reading the seams. She remembered that I took my coffee without sugar after I mentioned it once. She moved a Friday fitting. Without being asked, when she overheard me tell Margot I had to collect someone from school. She asked me in the 4th month what the silver thimble on my finger was, and I told her it was my mother's. And she went quiet and pressed her thumb to her watch and said, "Keep wearing it where I can see it. I like knowing the people I work with carry their dead with them. It means they'll be careful with mine." And she walked to the window and stood with her back to the room for a while, and I stood with the pins in my mouth and my mother's thimble on my finger and loved her so much I could not breathe, and said nothing, because the next true sentence out of my mouth would have been, "You have a daughter." And I was a coward in exactly the way I had spent 5 years being a coward, and I told myself it was protection. I have asked myself many times why I did not tell her in the 4th month or the 5th when I knew past the possibility of pretending otherwise, that the 72 hours had not been 72 hours to her either. Because they had not. I learned it in pieces. I learned it the day she had me restitch the lining of an old charcoal jacket, and I found, in the breast pocket, sewn flat against the silk, where a tailor would never look, a folded sample tag, soft with age, and I did not have to open it because I had written the other half of it, 6 years before, in a borrowed room. She had kept it. She had carried it in the lining of a jacket for 6 years, into board meetings and onto planes, sewn flat where she could feel it through the cloth, and no one could see it. I stood in the fitting room with her dead quiet jacket in my hands and her 6-year-old handwriting against my thumb, and I understood that the woman I had decided was too powerful to be hurt by me had been carrying the proof of the opposite over her own heart for as long as I had been carrying her child. And I sewed the lining back over it. I sewed her own note back into the dark where she kept it. Because if I took it out, I would have to explain how I knew what it said. And so I did the most careful and most cowardly stitching of my life, and I closed the seam and I handed her back the jacket, and she put it on and pressed her thumb once to her watch and said, "Good as the day it was made, and did not know that I had just held the last 6 years of both our lives in my 2 hands and put them back exactly where neither of us could reach them. That was the 5th month. After that, I stopped being able to tell myself it was protection. After that, it was only fear, and I knew it was only fear, and I held the perimeter anyway, because the longer I held it, the more impossible the telling became. There is a point in a lie of omission where the omission itself becomes the unforgivable thing, larger than the fact you were hiding. And I had passed that point in the basement on the first day and gone on past it every day since. And I could feel the Centenary coming the way you feel weather. And I told myself that after the Centenary, after she was bonded to Coraline Aubrac and safely, finally, beyond my reach, I would resign the contract and take June back across the water, and the wall would hold forever because there would be a sea in it again. The wall almost came down on its own in the 6th month, and not because of me. It was a Wednesday in the autumn, a late fitting, the light already going out of the north windows, and I had June's drawing in my apron pocket because she had pressed it into my hand at the school gate that morning as a wax crayon picture of the two of us holding hands under a juniper tree, the kind of thing a child makes 100 of and a mother keeps everyone. I had forgotten it was there. Séverine was in the half-made coat, and she reached past me for the pincushion on the table, and the drawing slipped out of my apron pocket and went down onto the floor between us, face up, in the last of the north light. She looked at it before I could move. A child's drawing, 2 figures, tree. I bent and I picked it up too fast, and I felt the blood go out of my face, and I said, in the steady voice my mother gave me instead of money, my niece. And Séverine looked at me in the triple mirror. Not at the drawing, at me, at my face doing the contained thing too hard. And she was quiet for a moment, pressing her thumb to the watch, and then she did the kindest and most dangerous thing she did in 8 months, which was to decide not to notice. She who notices everything looked at the lie on my face and chose, deliberately, to set it down the way you set down a thread you are not ready to pull. She said only, "She draws the tree the way you read a seam." And she let me put the drawing back in my apron, and she went on with the fitting, and I understood, with my hands shaking around a pin, that she had seen something and had chosen, out of some courtesy I had not earned, to let me keep it. I had built a wall, and the woman on the other side of it had just quietly handed me back a brick that had fallen out, and asked me nothing, and I went home that night and held my sleeping daughter, and understood that I was being protected by the very person I was lying to. It happened again 3 weeks later, worse. June ran a fever on a morning I had a fitting I could not move, and Disley was in an exam, and the school would not take her. And I made the single reckless decision of those 8 months. I brought June to the building. I told myself I would keep her in the archive, in the basement, 3 floors below anyone, for 2 hours, with a coloring book, while I went up and did the fitting and came back down. The basement was safe. The basement had always been safe. And for 90 minutes it was. And then Genevieve Voss, who comes in on Tuesdays but had come in on a Wednesday because the Centenary was close, decided to visit the archive she had built and came down the stairs without warning and found a feverish 5-year-old asleep on a folded conservation blanket between the drawers of her own house's history. I came down to that. I came down the stairs and saw the founder of Maison Voss standing over my sleeping child, very still, her head tilted at the exact angle June tilts as hers. And I thought, this is it, this is the lawyer. This is the arrangement. Ty and I started to explain, and Genevieve Voss lifted one hand and stopped me. She looked at June for a long time. She breathed in once, the way her granddaughter does, slowly all the way down. And she looked at me with her dry paper eyes. And she did not say what I was braced for. I said it was a conservation blanket from the cabinet. She said, "I know what it is." And when I did not answer, she nodded, once, as if I had, and she said only, "Keep her warm." The archive is cold in the afternoon. T and she went back up the stairs, and she did not say another word to me for 2 months, and I did not understand, until the night of the gala, that the old woman had read the whole story off the tilt of a sleeping child's head and had simply, like her granddaughter, chosen not to pull the thread until the thread was ready to come. I should have known then. 2 people in that house had looked at the edges of my secret and chosen mercy, and I had taken the mercy as a sign that the wall was holding, when it was actually a sign that the wall was made of people who loved more carefully than I had given anyone in that house credit for. I went on holding it. The Centenary came on like weather. I met Coraline Aubrac in the 7th month, because the silver gown that was hers needed her body to be finished, and the body that wears a gown to be presented in must be fitted by the conservator who saved the cloth, and that conservator was me. So I spent 4 afternoons in the North Light room with the woman Séverine was going to bond, putting pins in the 1949 silver against her living shoulders. And I had been prepared for 4 afternoons to hate her, and I could not do it. She was not cold the way the trade papers said either. She was tired. She stood in her great-grandmother's gown with her arms held out, and she watched my hands in the mirror the way Séverine watched them. And on the 3rd afternoon, she said, out of nowhere to the mirror, "You're very good." Séverine said you read a seam from the back, and I felt the floor tilt because I had not known that Séverine spoke of me upstairs, in the rooms I was not in, to the woman she was going to marry. And Coraline Aubrek saw the tilt. She notices things too. They all do. The great houses. It is the whole training. And she was quiet for a while, with the pins going in, and then she said the thing that told me the bond was a cage for both of them, and not only for the woman I loved. Can I tell you something, Calloway, that I have not told anyone? I am marrying a house, not as persons. Séverine knows it. I know it. Our grandmothers know it. She looked at her great-grandmother's silver in the mirror. I had a person once, in Marseille. And then she made the small, dry sound that in a less disciplined woman would have been a sob. And she said, "Pin the shoulder, please. It pulls." T and I pinned the shoulder, and I did not hate Coraline Aubrek, and the gala got 1 degree more impossible, because now I knew that the public ceiling I was going to stand in the dark and survive would be the locking of 2 cages at once, and I was the one putting the silver assassin the second prisoner with my own hands. I went home that night, and I sat on the edge of June's bed and watched her sleep. The small fig under it, the head tilted at the angle I could no longer pretend I did not recognize, and I understood that I was now holding 3 lives behind my wall instead of 1. June, Séverine's, Coraline's, 3 people who would all, in different ways, be sentenced on the Centenary night, and I, who had built my whole self on being invisible, was the only person in the building who could see all 3 sentences coming and had decided, out of 6 years of fear wearing the mask of kindness, to say nothing and let them all be carried out. That was the night I came closest to telling her. I got as far as the door of my own flat with my coat half on, at 11 at night, meaning to go to the house, to wait outside it, to say the true sentence at last. And then I looked back at June's open door, and the old arithmetic took me. The lawyer, the letter, the marble lobby, the kind voice saying, "Arrangements will be made." And I took my coat off, and I hung it up, and I went to bed, and I lost the last clean chance I would ever have to tell her myself. In private, in time, the next chance was a stage, and a child, and 300 people, and 4 cameras, and it was not mine to take. It was June's. I had a plan. The plan was to survive the gala. I had built June's whole life on surviving things by being invisible at them, and I had 1 more invisibility to perform, the largest of my life, and then we would be free. I would dress Coraline Aubrek in her great-grandmother's silver. I would stand at the side curtain in my plain black and watch the woman I loved promise herself to someone suitable in front of 300 people. I would feel it, the way you feel a needle go in, and I would not move, and then it would be over, and I would take my daughter home. That was the plan. The plan did not survive Dilly's exam. Dilly had June on the night of the Centenary because I had no one else, and because the gala ran past midnight, and a 5-year-old cannot be left alone. Dilly was meant to keep her at the flat. But Dilly was a fashion student, and the Centenary of Maison Voss was the event of her professional life, and one of the other interns had fallen through on the coat check staff, and Dilly, 24, broke, dazzled, and certain she could manage both, had taken the coat check shift and brought June with her, in the navy dress with the white collar, with a coloring book and the promise of a taxi home at 10, and had set her up in a quiet corner of the cloakroom at the Hotel Salé with strict instructions to stay, and had then been buried for 40 minutes under 300 coats and the most important night of her young life. And June, who is 5, and who is mine, and who has my mother's patience for exactly as long as a 5-year-old has any patience at all, got bored and got curious and slipped out of the cloakroom into the most beautiful room she had ever seen, full of light, looking, because she is a child, and because children in a frightening crowd do exactly one thing for the only face in the world that meant safety. She was looking for me. I did not know any of this. I was at the side curtain in my plain black, where I had been all evening, having dressed Coraline Aubrek in the 1949 silver an hour before, and stepped back into the dark to do my job, which was to be invisible while the thing I had dreaded happened on schedule. Séverine was at the lectern. She was in the midnight wool I had fitted to her 3 days before, with the dead jacket's twin grammar in every seam, and she had begun the speech. 100 years of Maison Voss, her grandmother's 1 room, the future of the house, and I was watching her mouth make the shapes that would, in about 90 more seconds, say Coraline Aubrach's name. And I was holding myself very still, holding the perimeter one last time, and I did not see my daughter come out of the crowd at the foot of the stage until she was already climbing the steps. I have tried to describe what the next 11 seconds were. I cannot do it from the inside. The inside is white. I can only tell you what I have reconstructed since, from the cameras, from Margot, from Séverine. June came up the 4 carpeted steps. The room had not noticed her yet. A small child at the edge of a lit stage, a half second of nothing. Séverine saw her. Séverine stopped mid-sentence, the way you stop when a child appears somewhere a child should not be, with an alpha's whole body turning toward a pup before the mind has decided anything. And she looked down at the little girl in the navy dress, and the little girl looked past her, scanning, frightened, searching the wings, and found me. And June's whole face changed, the way a face changes when the one safe thing in the world finally appears, and she ran. Not to Séverine, past her, across the stage, to me. And she put both arms around my knees, where I stood frozen in the dark at the side curtain, in front of 300 people and 4 cameras, and she said it. The room did the thing rooms do. The long indrawn breath, the rustle, the 300 heads turning to follow the child, to find out who she was. And I did the only thing my body knew how to do, which was to go down on one knee and gather her in, because she was frightened and she was mine, and there is no version of me that lets her stand alone and scared on a stage. So I knelt and I held her, and my face was in her hair, the white tea and the small fig note under it that I had smelled every day of her life and had taught myself for 6 years not to think about where the fig had come from. And when I lifted my head, Séverine Voss was looking at us. She had come around the lectern. She was standing in the center of the stage with the canceled speech in her hand, and 300 people watching her, and the woman she was about to be engaged to somewhere in the front rows in 1949 silver, and she was not looking at any of them. She was looking at the child in my arms, and then at me, and I watched her do the arithmetic I had done 6 years before on a pavement on the Rue de Rivoli, except she did it in 11 seconds, in public, on the worst possible night, with the whole house watching, the scent, the white tea, the fig under it that was her own, the age of the child, the math of a June 5 years gone, the borrowed room, the sample tag in the lining over her heart, the name she had never been given. Calloway, you'll do my fittings now. T, the conservator who reads seams from the back the way her grandmother had taught her, all of it arriving at once behind her steady gray-green eyes. And her face did the thing I had prayed for 6 years I would never have to watch it do, which was understand. She did not shout. She has never, in my hearing, raised her voice. She crossed the stage. June peeked at her, and Séverine closed her eyes. The room came apart after that, the way rooms do. The photographs, the rising voices, Coraline Aubrach, standing up in the front row in 1949 silver with her face white, Geneviève Voss, 74, rising more slowly from the table beside her, the cameras, the directories of the house, Margot's, coming up the side steps faster than a 63-year-old should move, putting herself between us and the room, saying enough in a voice 41 years in the building had taught the whole house to obey. They got us off the stage. They got us into a small gilt anteroom behind the curtain, June and me and Margot, and they closed the doors on the noise, and June, overwhelmed at last, began to cry. And I held her and rocked her and said the small, useless, true things you say. I've got you. You found me. You're safe. Well done finding me. T and Margot stood at the door with her back to us, guarding it, not asking a single question. Because Margot notices everything too, and had, I understood later, suspected most of it for months. The door opened once. It was not Séverine. It was Geneviève Voss. She came in alone. She is very small, the founder, smaller than you expect from the photographs, in dark gray with a single rope of pearls. And she has her granddaughter's gray-grains eyes set in 74 years of a face that has refused more things than most people ever want. She looked at June crying in my arms. She looked at me. She did not look at me the way I had spent 6 years being afraid of being looked at. The lawyer's look. The arrangements will be made look. I said yes. And the old woman looked at the child, and the child has her granddaughter's exact way of tilting her head. And Genevieve Voss was quiet for a long moment. And then she said the thing that told me the house would not, in the end, do to me what I had spent 6 years certain it would do. My granddaughter has been carrying a sample tag in the lining of a charcoal jacket for 6 years. I have known about it for 6 years. I have a tailor who tells me everything. She looked at June. She did not invent her. And then Genevieve Voss, who arranges the lives of the house the way her granddaughter arranges silver, who had spent years engineering the Aubrac bond, looked at me with her dry paper eyes and said, I am too old to pretend that an arrangement is worth more than the only thing my granddaughter has ever chosen for herself. The Aubrac matter is finished as of tonight. It was always going to embarrass someone. She turned to go. At the door, she stopped the way her granddaughter stops on stairs, and she said, without turning around, she is in the green salon. She has sent everyone away. She is waiting for you to decide whether to come. Do not make her wait the way you made her wait 6 years. And she left. I want to say something first, before I tell you the rest. For 6 years, I had built my entire understanding of myself on a single belief that I was protecting her. That the distance was a gift I was giving a powerful woman who could not afford the gift of us. Standing in that gilt anteroom with my daughter's tears going dry on my collar and Genevieve Voss's words in the air, I understood, finally and completely, that I had been protecting myself and that the person I had failed to protect was not Séverine and was not even me. It was June. I had given my daughter 5 years of a half-life, of a not-in-the-picture tea of a mother who flinched at a name when there had been the whole time a woman carrying a sample tag over her heart who would have got down on both knees on a public stage at the first sight of her. I had called my fear protection, and I had spent my daughter's childhood paying for it. That is the true thing. I am not the noble omega of the story people tell. I am a woman who was afraid of being told she did not matter, and who hid a child to avoid hearing it, and who was wrong every single day for 5 years about a woman who noticed everything. I carried June, asleep at last from crying, and I went to the green salon. She had sent everyone away, as her grandmother said. The room was empty except for her. She was standing at the window with her back to the door, the way she stood when a thing was too large to let any part of her move, and she did not turn around when I came in, and for a moment we were exactly as we had been on so many afternoons in the North Light. Her back, my held breath, the unsaid thing in the room. I said, I knew who you were 11 weeks after the sample room. I never told you. I have been lying to you since the first morning in the basement, and before that for 6 years. Her name is Juniper. We call her June. She is 5 in March. She is yours. I was afraid of a lawyer's letter, and I called it protecting you. And it was not protecting you. It was protecting me. And it cost her 5 years, and I will spend the rest of my life being sorry for that. And I do not expect you to. She turned around. I had been braced for the lawyer's face, the arrangements will be made face. I had been braced for 6 years. What I had not braced for, what no part of me had let me imagine because imagining it was more dangerous than any letter, was the face she actually had, which was wet, which was undone, which was the face of a woman who has spent 6 years sewing a note into the dark of a jacket and has just been handed the rest of the sentence. She looked at me. She looked at the sleeping child in my arms, her own daughter, for the first time at rest. And she did the thing that broke me, which was that she did not reach for the child. And then she looked up at me, and she said the thing that I will hear for the rest of my life, in the voice that never rises. I noticed everything about you. 8 months. I noticed the coffee and the thimble, and the way you read a seam from the back, the way my grandmother taught me, and I told myself I had found, late, the friend I never let myself have. I noticed everything except this. How did I not? Wren. She pressed her thumb to the watch once, and her hand was shaking. Say it again. The thing you said at the door just now. I said June. Juniper. And Séverine Voss crossed the green salon, and she did not kiss me. That was not what that moment was, and she knew it, because she noticed everything. She put one arm around me and one hand against the back of our sleeping daughter's head. And she gathered us both in, the whole hidden 6 years of us, against the midnight wool I had fitted with my own hands. And she put her face down in the place where my white tea and June's white tea were the same scent, and she breathed us in. And she held on, and for the first time in 6 years, I did not patrol any wall. There was no wall. I had carried it across an ocean and up a high street and down into a basement, and it came down in a green salon at the Hotel Soleil with my daughter asleep between the two people who made her. And it did not feel like losing. It felt like setting down a thing I had been carrying so long I had stopped feeling the weight and feeling in the sudden lightness exactly how heavy it had been. I want to tell the rest quickly, because the rest is not the kind of thing that needs slowing down. It is only the kind of thing that needs to be true. She did not bond Coraline Aubrac. The merger was announced 3 weeks later as a partnership of the houses with no marriage in it. Genevieve Voss arranged that too, the way she arranges everything. And the trade papers called it modern and forward-looking and never knew that it had been decided by a 5-year-old in a navy dress. Coraline Aubrac, who I had been prepared to hate and could not, sent June a doll. She had never wanted the bond either. The houses had wanted it. She was, it turned out, in love with a sculptor in Marseille, and the Centenary that ruined the arrangement set her free as much as it set me free. And she sends June a present every March, and June calls her the Silver Lady. And that is its own small mercy in a story I had expected to have none. There was a season of difficulty. I will not pretend there was not. 6 years is a long time to take from a person, and Séverine had to grieve the 5 years of June she would never get back. And there were nights she could not look at me for it, and I let her not look at me. Because she was owed the grief, and I was the one who had caused it. There was a night in the 2nd month when she found a photograph, June at 2, gap-toothed, on a beach in Devon. A day I had thought was ordinary and had not known was a day Séverine would one day have to mourn not being at, and she went out onto the balcony of the too big flat and stood in the cold with her back to the glass for a long time, the way she stands when a thing is too large to let any part of her move. And I did not go out to her, because there are griefs you have caused that you do not get to comfort. After a while she came in, and she sat down at the kitchen table, and she put the photograph flat in front of her, and she pressed her thumb to its surface, once, the way she presses the watch. And she said, without looking up, "I am not angry at you. I want to be. It would be easier. But I keep doing the arithmetic and it comes out the same every time. You were 20 and alone, and you had read in a newspaper exactly how little a house like mine spends on omegas it finds inconvenient, and you were not wrong about what the houses would have done. You were only wrong about me. And I never gave you a single reason in 72 hours to believe I was different from the house. So I do not get to be angry." And she turned the photograph face up and looked at our gap-toothed daughter on a Devon beach, and she asked me to tell her about the day. And I told her about the day, and that was how we did it. She would find a piece of the 5 years and grieve it, and then ask me to give her the day. And I would give her the day, until between us we had built back, in words, a clumsy paper version of the years I had taken, and it was not the same as having been there. And it was the only repair available to us. And we made it, day by day, the hard row last. We did not rush. She did not rush. She had learned, she told me once, in the basement on the first day, from a conservator who worked toward the failing part instead of the strong one, that you do not stabilize what is already sound. You put your hands on the part that is coming apart, and you work the hardest row last, slowly, against every rule, because the most fragile thing is the thing that must be made to hold. She worked the hardest row last with me. We live in Paris now, June 6. She has 2 mothers and a great-grandmother who is teaching her to correct apprentices, and a school in the 11th, and a doll from the Silver Lady, and a juniper tree that Séverine planted in a pot on the balcony of the flat that is too big and that I keep making smaller with the warm, cluttered clutter of an actual life, the chipped cups, the school drawings, the silver thimble that lives on the windowsill now where the light catches it. Margot retired last spring after 42 years. At her dinner, she stood up and told the whole atelier the story of how she had reassigned a basement conservator to the creative director's fittings against every protocol of the house. because, she said, she had watched the creative director go down to the archive 4 evenings in a row to look at a gown she had already approved. And Margot Hess, who notices everything, had decided that a house built on noticing things ought to act on what it sees. She looked at me across the dinner when she said it. She knew. She had known for months. She had taken the wall I built, and she had quietly, deliberately, with 41 years of authority, opened a door in it, and she has never once asked me to thank her, and I never will, because some kindnesses are too large to be reduced by being named. Séverine still presses her thumb to the watch, when a thing is too large to let any other part of her move. I see her do it at June's school concerts in the dark, when our daughter walks out onto a small lit stage in a paper crown, and I reach over and put my hand over the watch and over her thumb, and she lets me. And we watch June find our faces in the dark the way she found mine across a ballroom of 300 people, and light up and wave. She found me that night. Out of 300 strangers and 4 cameras, and the whole weight of 2 houses and 6 years of my fear, my daughter walked the length of a room and found the one face that meant safety, and in finding mine, she gave us the other one, the one I had hidden her from, the one who got down on both knees on a public stage and said, "Say it again!" Because the most disciplined alpha in Paris could not bear to have heard the word mama from her own child only once. Sometimes at home in the ordinary evening, June will say it, mama, just to me, about nothing, the way children do, and across the room I will see Séverine go still and press her thumb to her watch and look up. And I have learned to say it for her, so she does not have to ask in front of June and let our daughter see how much it costs her. Say it again, T, I tell June softly. And June, who has no idea she is the most important sentence 2 grown women ever failed, and then finally managed to say, looks up from her drawing and grins and says it again. If you have a person you have been hiding from out of a fear you have told yourself is kindness, tell them. Do not work toward the failing part last. I worked the hardest row last, and it cost my daughter 5 years, and we were lucky, luckier than the story had any right to let us be, because the woman on the other side of my fear turned out to have been carrying the proof of me over her heart the whole time. Most people are not that lucky. Tell them before a child has to climb a stage and do it for you. I think about it more than I tell anyone. About the version of that night where Dilly's exam was on a Tuesday instead of a Friday, where June stayed home, where I dressed Corlin Aubrac and stood in the dark and survived the gala the way I planned and took my daughter back across the water and was never found. I could have done it. I had the discipline. I had 6 years of practice at being invisible at the exact moment it mattered most to be seen. And June would have grown up with a mother who flinched at a name, and a juniper tree with no one to plant it, and a great-grandmother she never met teaching apprentices in a city she was never allowed into, and none of us would have known what we had missed. Because the thing about a wall built well is that the people on either side of it stop being able to imagine the room on the other side. My daughter tore my wall down with one word, in a navy dress in front of 300 people, because she is braver than I am and always was, and I have decided that the bravest thing I will ever do is let her keep being braver than me, out loud, in a house with no walls in it. Thank you for watching. If this story stayed with you, leave a comment and tell me where you are watching from. Like this video and subscribe to Luna's GL Heat for the next one. I will see you there.